This is Why We Will Make It, a podcast by Alterleap, a safe space where we allow ourselves to imagine and to learn how to take action to build a brilliant future for our planet. Here, you will learn from amazing people all about the breakthroughs, ideas, and technologies taking place and proving why we will make it. Hello, we're so excited to welcome all of you here today in this new episode of Why We Will Make It, our podcast from Alterleap. And today we have an amazing guest. I'm so excited to have you here. Her name is Dileri Berdeja, and she is a woman that we not only admire and respect, but also love as well, because she's doing amazing work to protect animals and to protect our planet therethrough. And so I'm going to read her bio so you know a little bit about her and more details and facts. And then we start this conversation with Dileri. So let's do it. So Dileri Berdeja, as a scientist, focused on invasive species, animal welfare, and biodiversity conservation. She is contributing to education and improved decision making, and she studied a bachelor's in science in natural resources conservation with a major in science and management at the University of British Columbia. She now works as an independent consultant supporting biodiversity conservation projects within Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Her experience in animal welfare has encouraged her to support businesses who have relations with biodiversity, farm, and domestic animals. Her aim is to improve the perspectives and management practices of animals to increase their protection and support their welfare. So, as you can see, as all of us, she's an animal lover, but she has the science, the studies, and the experience to back it up and to use it to really bring about change and welfare for animals. So, Dileri, welcome to your home, Why We Will Make It. This podcast is made for women like you who are really spearheading change and inspiring all of us to build a better future. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Ariana. I'm very excited to be here and to be able to contribute to great decision making and to making people more aware about the importance of biodiversity and conservation and empowerment of women who are passionate for nature as well. Thank you so much. I appreciate being here and I'm very excited as well.
Thank you. I love what you're saying about biodiversity. I think these days we all talk about if you listen to the news, it's all about climate change, global warming, and of course that's an issue. I'm not saying it's not, but biodiversity is key. Like biodiversity is really like a pillar of life, and we need to protect it. And of course, when we talk about biodiversity, we talk about plants and fungi and bacteria as well, and ecosystems, but of course, animals. And and I think we all know right now with all the heat waves going on in the around the world, and even before the pandemic, we saw that in Australia with the fires. Animals sometimes are silent victims, and I mean silent because they cannot write blogs or record podcasts. But we need to do something there. So I would love to start by asking you if you could tell us and tell the audience a little bit about your work and what is it that you do.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ariana. Well, my path in biodiversity conservation started a couple of years ago when I started working in an animal rehabilitation center in South Africa. So my biggest passion always has been animals, and I really admire the way in which they behaved and their social interactions. So I was very curious of learning a bit more of it. So I went into animal rehabilitation, and then right after that, I worked at an emergency hospital pursuing this dream of mine of becoming a vet. And then I eventually realized that a lot of people highlight the importance of domestic animals, but hinder the importance of wild animals. And oftentimes it's species that we're not in contact with directly. So we forget how important it is to make sure we understand their value, we acknowledge their diversity, and we also acknowledge what risks are they going through. So after being in this veterinary path and animal rehabilitation path, I started to get this very big passion for wild animals and their conservation. So right after that, I started getting a bit involved in animal welfare. And what that refers to is the ethics behind the use and treatment of animals. So, how are we treating animals? What are the challenges that animals face on their daily basis? Not only domestic animals, but also wild animals, also animals used in animal research. So, with a background as well in animal research, I started to get involved with the Canadian Council of Animal Care, with conservation, NGOs, private businesses, and independent people who were using or somewhat were related to the treatment of animals, either in the field or, as I mentioned before, in laboratory institutions. So today I work as a consultant, as you said a bit earlier, and my job is basically to improve animals' lives and to understand and acknowledge what challenges are they facing, how can we improve them, and how can we support their conservation.
I love that. I love that. Could you tell us a little bit of that sort of work? Like, is there any project, for instance, that you're involved in, and what does it look like?
Yeah, of course. So right now I am a consultant for a company called Coastal Conservation. And what we do is we manage invasive species of wild
Mhm.
animals that were introduced into island ecosystems. So islands are one of the most vulnerable ecosystems in the world because they're often limited spatially, and they're also more vulnerable to change as they
Mm.
have a lower genetic diversity. So after my work a couple of years ago with Greg Howald, who is a scientist very recognized in island conservation, he taught me through his lens and through his eyes that island ecosystems face very big amount of threats, and that also is induced by the management of wildlife species of humans. So, oftentimes, I'll put an example, through this recreational hunting, people introduced animals into islands to be able to hunt them. And that was a recreational activity that people found as exciting and encouraging and fun. And eventually, these animals, clever enough, were able to reproduce at rates way higher than normal. So this reproduction rates went up, eventually outcompeting this local diversity that was
Mm.
originally find, found in islands. So eventually putting under risk local biodiversity and bringing back, that initial problem of conservation, to which the point is now you're not only losing local species, but you're also increasing exogenous species in an ecosystem that is definitely suffering its impacts, not only by losing vegetation, but losing local species and compromising then the natural resources given in that ecosystem itself. So see it. Yeah, I'm very involved in island restoration and conservation as one of the projects that I'm working in currently.
Wow, I love that, and I think it's important for the audience also to understand that. I mean, I think we all need to understand what an invasive species is, because sometimes um, I don't know. I remember I was diving in the Caribbean in Cozumel, and the instructor said, if you come across a lionfish, then you should kill it. And I was like, what? No, I would never do that. And then they explained the impact of this fish on the ecosystem, and I mean, it's hard and it's crazy, and they do it, and they are, most of them, they're also conservationists, and they love nature, but they understand that if they don't control these invasive species, then they put at risk so much more. And when it comes to biodiversity loss, invasive species is one of the five reasons why we are experiencing biodiversity loss around the world. I can also think about the ajolote. I
Yeah.
don't know. I think in English it's called ajolotl or something like that.
Yes.
I don't
Yes.
know.
Yes.
But they, yeah, I mean, it only exists in Xochimilco, in this canal system, water system in the south of Mexico City, and they introduced a sort of fish in the, I think it was at the end of the 80s, and it's called I can't remember the name of the fish, but anyway, It's like a very commercial fish that they sell everywhere. And these fish started eating the ajolote, and now we are, I mean, it's on the brink of extinction, and now we're learning that it has so many interesting properties, and it's like really like a fascinating animal capable of regenerating itself in different parts, and we cannot lose any species because of our short-sighted decisions on introducing invasive species, right? So I think that work is super interesting. And how would you define an invasive species? Like, is it like a foreign one, or why do people put them there in the first place?
Yeah, yeah. So that's a great question and a very important standpoint. So usually there's species that are endemic to an area. So that means that they are born and basically raised within an area to which they're naturally adapted to. So that means that their genes and evolutionary pathways have been adapted for years to that area. So therefore, they have the genetic predisposition and genetic adaptations to be able to overcome the challenges that that ecosystem is exposed to. So, invasive species are usually species that are either brought by humans or are even immigrated themselves to those new ecosystems, but that they haven't been adapted throughout the years to that ecosystem. So, they're not necessarily genetically prepared to overcome the challenges that that ecosystem is exposed to. So, as an example, there can be different ways in which a species become invasive. So, some of the characteristics of invasive species is that they reproduce at very high rates. So, their reproduction rates are usually higher than species that are endemic. Why? Because if they're able to adapt properly, they usually outcompete that local species that are found within an area. Why? That is genetic adaptations that they might have been able to adapt to other ecosystems, and therefore they thrive in the new ecosystem that they're coming to. But I like to put this analogy as an example. So imagine in a household you have two people that always eat two apples, and that two people are able to eat those two apples throughout a week, and they are not hungry and they have enough food to survive. But then I invite other two people to join that household. So instead of having two people, now you have four, and you only have two apples for those four people now to feed on. So what will happen is that by the end of that week, those four people will be hungry, most probably. And as a good analogy, the problem is that they will become hungry and they won't have enough energy potentially to survive or to even reproduce. So for reproduction and survival, which are the two basic necessities for animal species, you need energy. So when you don't have enough energy, you're compromising the stability of that population, and therefore you're compromising the ability for them to survive. So that's what increases that extinction rates. So if you have just those two apples to feed those four people, you're that's the challenge you're seeing with invasive species. So probably in the example you gave with the lionfish, it's happening the same. Those type of fish were introduced from Africa originally, and people thought they were beautiful, and they are beautiful for sure, but they eventually came to an ecosystem that was well balanced with the right amount of species, and now you have more fish feeding out of the same resources. So eventually they were able to adapt quite well to the point that they outcompeted our local species, and eventually brought biodiversity of Mexico in this aquatic ecosystems down. And that is a great challenge that you often see with invasive species.
Wow. I think that was necessary for all of us to, to listen to. And I think we all should know what an invasive species is. So thank you for that. And I mean, I have so many questions and I would love to talk for hours about this because it's really important. There's a lot of people with eco anxiety about, the suffering of the planet, but precisely the suffering of animals as well, seeing polar bears struggling because the ice caps are melting, or all sorts of species that are having a hard time right now with the heat waves in Peru. I know birds are dying, seals are struggling as well, penguins as well. So in your work as a scientist focused on invasive species and animal welfare and biodiversity conservation, what are some of the most pressing challenges that you have encountered, and how do you approach them?
So I think one of the biggest challenges I often see is first the lack of knowledge, and that is, well, first of all, we gotta say knowledge is a privilege, and that's something that it is important to acknowledge. And so this lack of education oftentimes do not make us be aware enough to understand how our impacts are affecting animal welfare, biodiversity conservation, and the management of animals. So again, I'll say another very simple example, but how many times our parents or people we know went to the pet store to buy a pet that was found there? I can say a lot of people bought before, turtles and fish, and it was something very exciting to have in your home. And then I've heard so many stories of, oh, I couldn't take care of that turtle and I released it to the pond nearby, or my parents didn't allow me to keep my fish, so I, put it in the pond
Yeah.
nearby, or and that's just a very local domestic example, but I can also give the example of food preferences. There's people that prefer eating tuna or salmon versus our local species. So oftentimes that comes with the necessity of harvesting also locally those species.
Yeah.
So I think that challenge is we don't understand the impact that our preferences and our daily choices have on biodiversity and conservation. So oftentimes we do not acknowledge that our local species are so important to take care of. And we do very simple actions such as choosing some food over other, or, buying a pet at a pet store
Yeah.
because we think that's something normal, but it really has a very important impact. And also just at the example of the pet at a pet store, but you there's a lot of illegal there's illegal people that unfortunately sell this species, and that put a lot of pressure in harvesting species from the wild environment. So oftentimes it's illegally trafficked, and that is a huge problem itself for biodiversity. So I think, yeah, the biggest challenge I see is lack of education, lack of knowledge, and that, again, I acknowledge being able to have this knowledge is a privilege, but I think public institutions and people like ourselves, Ariana, we are able to communicate this information to other people and really be able to raise awareness to improve this daily decision making.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that you say that knowledge, um, and I would say, yeah, knowledge in terms of, being able to maybe study something, going to college, that sort of thing, having access, travel. Yes, of course, that's a privilege. And I would also add that apart from knowledge, there's information as well. And I think we all can be responsible, no matter where we come from, no matter how much money we have. If you have access to social media, and to the internet, I think we all have some sort of responsibility as well to inform ourselves before making decisions regarding the acquisition. I hate that, the acquisition of animals, but buying an animal from a pet store. I mean, to begin with, I would always say, please adopt, never buy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, but also if not only the decisions you make, but if you see that there's a pet store somewhere around your house that's selling exotic species, maybe you should call the authorities. Why not? Or tweet
Exactly.
about it, that sort of thing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and um, it's hard sometimes because we have also very ingrained habits in terms of what we eat, how we dress, what we do. Some of us were taught since we were very little that food should be this or that way, or life is like should be lived in this or that way. but we can challenge those ideas. You know, like a lot of people in Latin America think that if you don't have a piece of animal protein on your plate, then it's not a complete meal. Especially again people with privilege, because we also have a lot of poverty in Latin America. In Mexico, over 80% of people in Mexico are poor. So of course we have people living in rural areas that cannot eat any animal protein whatsoever unless they hunt it. And I'm not saying that everyone has access to that, but those who do, like in the cities, in the big cities, a lot of people eat very cheaply on street, from street places that sell tacos, for instance, in Mexico, and they will have meat 3 times a day because it's right there. There's a lady selling tacos, and I have pork tacos, and then for lunch I'll have some, whatever beef, and then at night maybe some chilaquiles with chicken or something. And people, when you tell them maybe you should be vegetarian 1 day a week, if we all do it, it would be good for the planet. They're like, what? No, why would I? So it's also informing ourselves and knowing that if we want to protect nature and protect animals, we also need to open our minds and be able to unlearn things and learn things anew and challenge old ideas of what should be. Because we don't have 10 planets, we only have one.
Yeah.
I love what you're saying about, knowledge and information. It's so true. And sorry, I'm talking a lot now, but
No, I love that.
I want to change the subject a little bit because I think it's amazing what you're doing. And you're also a young woman, and you're challenging a lot of ideas and preconceptions out there. I know a lot of people who would say, "Oh, I love animals, but I could never make a living out of that," or "I would love to follow my passion, but that's not realistic. Maybe I should study law or whatever."
Yeah.
And you're here, and you're doing something amazing, impactful for the planet. You are building your own path. You are being successful. You are part of an amazing community of people who are doing great work, and you are a young woman who took that path and decided to do it. So how was it for you? How has been your journey throughout this adventure, and also as a woman in the scientific community?
Thank you so much. I think that's a great question. I would lie if I said it was easy, because it wasn't. I think I've come across a lot of times in my life where I have been very discouraged and very frustrated at the idea that I've followed this passion for animals. And I gotta say, it's very important for you to understand, and I don't see you, Ariana, but I think as a person that when you have a passion, it comes with challenges, and that's just the reality of it. Whatever you do, it will have its own challenges. And I think for animals, it's a challenge that is out of your hands a lot of the times. And what I mean with that is, first, animals are worldwide, right? So it's something that doesn't matter how much you try to do an impact, you might not see a worldwide impact right away from an action. And that is sometimes something challenging that you got to be aware of, for sure, because you might feel discouraged sometimes. You might be doing something very positive in an area, and they are doing the opposite in the other side of the world. And you might then feel this discouragement that, oh, the action that I just performed is not as powerful, or it's not making an impact worldwide. So I think to start, I felt definitely discouraged that sometimes my actions are not enough. And I I've worked definitely in different areas. I include the area of animal research and in businesses where the biggest priority is money, and that is something very hard sometimes, because the first priority to a company is not necessarily to give its money for conservation, but instead to be able to make a profit. And sometimes for animal research, you realize that you're basically making use of species to be able to learn something that I'm sure will improve human health. And it is something that we until now that we haven't used something else, it's something that we need or we require, or it really supports our knowledge and understanding of human health. But there is very big emotional challenges that come with it, and I think those are important to acknowledge. And I have learned throughout my career that, first of all, I shouldn't be discouraged if my action doesn't change the world immediately and
Oh
doesn't
yeah.
change the way everyone thinks. And I even put it at a local scale. Like, I'm quite sure I haven't convinced most of my friends and family that what I'm doing is going to change, our our countries. But I'm quite sure I have impacted a couple of people, and I have made a couple of businesses and organizations change the way they think. And that itself is already a big impact. And that is already something important. And for the emotional part of working with animals, I think it's just acknowledging that we need to have this holistic approach of animals, and not from a view, an anthropocentric view of using animals for our benefit, but we need to acknowledge their value by its own. Like, they're already amazing species. They are beautiful. They have amazing adaptational characteristics, the
Mm.
amazing like social interactions with themselves. So it is very exciting to work with animals when you acknowledge that they're very valuable by their own, and that if you see it through the lens of what benefits do they bring to society, and how much are we using them, and how much are we affecting them, you will feel discouraged right away. But if
Oh.
you see it through a lens of how special they are and how important they are for societies, then you'll feel passion forever, I'm quite sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, has it been hard for you as a woman, building your own place, or yeah, I mean, taking your own space and place in the scientific community as well?
Yeah, it has been challenging, for sure. Why? Because I've been told that women are more sensitive or more emotional, and yeah, I am more sensitive, more emotional than a lot of people, but I don't like to differentiate gender in this case, because I've met so many amazing conservationists that have been women or men that have suffered the impacts of, not being able to follow through the action you want to do. But I think as a woman, I've felt a bit more encouraged by this already understanding that we might be more sensitive. I think that's way more empowering in my case, because I've been able to have this really amazing connection with my emotions and my professional career. So of course I've been, going to therapy, and I've been treating those things that I find challenging, but I've been so in touch with my emotions throughout my scientific career that I think I found it to be a bit more empowering than what more people could potentially, get to through or get able to experience in their careers. But I think the scientific community has started to be a bit more inclusive. I still acknowledge that there's way more men in academia than
Yeah.
women, and that's still the sad reality of the lack of gender equality and gender inclusion, especially for women. I think it's becoming a challenging that we're slowly starting to resolve, but we still have a lot to work with.
Yeah, but I mean, you're giving many of us a great example, and also younger generations that aspire to also do something for animals, for the planet, and I love that. And I was recently reading. I can't remember who she was, but I promise I will look it up and then include it in the links when we publish this episode. But I was reading like I think it was an end of year ceremony at some university, and there was this. I think she's a biologist as well. I can't remember. But the thing is, she was invited to give a speech. And she said, normally people will tell you to follow your passion, to follow your heart. But I think right now it would be irresponsible for me to say that because our planet is aching so much. And so I think we all need to find a space in the global warming, biodiversity fields and community where our heart can find its home. But we need to go there. We need to put our talents, our efforts there, and I think it's tough, but at the same time, I think it's beautiful because the world needs us to do this. So before it was aspirational, like, oh, I wish I could work in conservation or something, but it's so out there, I should maybe focus on being a lawyer or a doctor or I don't know. But right now, we know that also the jobs in the future that are going to be really relevant are the ones that are connected with the protection of our planet. So I love that you're inspiring us with your career and your path, but also want to let the audience know that it's actually a very interesting and cool and relevant and urgent and important path as well. So if you have little girls in your house, sisters, nephews, goddaughters, I don't know, who are interested in this, never discourage them. Quite the contrary, And women are kicking ass in this field
Yeah,
as well. Yeah, I mean,
definitely.
there you are. But we also have amazing examples of older women who did it before and also showed us the path, like Jane Goodall, like Sylvia Earle, like Rachel Carson, and you are this new generation of women who are also inspiring the next one. So I love it, and never be discouraged. uh, Here's an example, Dileri, of
Yeah.
someone who is still doing it, and yes, you acknowledge there are challenges, but they can be overcome as well, and you can always grow stronger from them, right?
Definitely. I definitely agree. And I think there's amazing examples, as you just mentioned. And I'm sure people are starting to become more aware. And although they might not necessarily publish what they're doing, there's great small initiatives out there that are starting to arise. And I encourage everyone to start looking around and see what positive impacts, people are doing out there, and, starting to follow those steps, because that is how you really make change, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, talking about that, you're very interested and involved in education as well. So, how do you believe that we can raise awareness and promote understanding about the importance of biodiversity conservation among the general public, but especially with younger generations as well?
Yeah. So I think, well, obviously everything happens through education. So I think within younger generations, we can make a very amazing impact of making it part of their lifestyles, right? So involving this conservation action to their daily decision making, so they
Mhm.
can, be part of this mentality of let's save the world versus let's use all the resources of the world, as it was in older generations. So I always like to say this following steps. Number one, encourage this education within the households. And what I mean with that, it can be through a fun story, it can be through an article, it can be through a video, make that visual connection to a conservation action or to a species, or acknowledge the beauty of a species that you might not see in your daily activities. Something that is super important in conservation, bring it to a local level. So what I mean with that is oftentimes you will be less worried of something that you're not seeing in your daily basis, such as an example, polar bears. Usually is a very big topic, but I highly doubt or know of anyone that is doing actions every day to save the polar bears from their houses.
Yeah.
But something that I like to encourage kids to do is go outside and walk around your community. So, just walk around and then observe. So the first step is observe whatever you see. So observe biodiversity at your local community. So observe if it's birds, bees, or if you have a larger carnivore. So just sit down and see what biodiversity you see. What are the plants you see? And that gives you that local connectivity to biodiversity, which is very important for conservation. Once you observe, then you must acknowledge. And what do I mean with acknowledge? So, right as the word says, write down what species are you looking at and what are their roles within that local community. So if you're looking at a bee, you're looking at that bee going to that flower and probably, moving that pollen to another flower. So already by that, by looking at that action, you're acknowledging the role of that species within your local community. So after acknowledging and after observing, you will set up an action. So what does that action look like? Again, we're just looking at the local community. You will be able to say, oh, guess what? During winter, the bees that come here do not have enough plants to feed from. And that is a natural path. But perhaps during winter, a lot of people don't like to, take care of their plants because they know that they will die. So what
Yeah.
action can I do? Perhaps I can go outside and I can plant every winter new plants for the bees to have. Or, I can go outside and if my neighbor, I don't know, grew a plant that it was very important for my birds to go and feed on, then I'll go and plant, that important plant that my birds used to feed on. So that action needs to be targeted to that already interaction you're seeing of a species within your local community. And then I guess when you make that action, the most important thing I always ask people, not only younger generations, but also in older, the monitoring and evaluation is the most important conservation action you can do. So it's amazing this, restoration projects that people do of, oh, I'll go to this forest and I'll plant 1,000 trees. Awesome. But who is going back a year after to make sure those trees are still there and
Yeah.
they're healthy? And of that 1,000 trees you planted, how many of them actually made it through? So I think that those 5 steps are very important. Like provide education, like provide observation, acknowledge the diversity at your local level, create a conservation action, and finalize it by monitoring if that action had a positive effect. And to be honest, I think that's something you can apply with younger generations, with older generations. But
Yeah.
it's very encouraging for kids to have a job and to be able to have, a thing of their own. So I'm quite sure if you tell your kid, guess what? Go and look at your daily bird that comes and feed off your plants that are on your garden. I'm quite sure he'll feel that excitement and he'll understand it's really his task and his responsibility to make that happen. And I think with actions as simple as that, you can really make a difference in changing this mentality that is really part of our daily lives, and it's within our communities, our actions towards biodiversity conservation.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. And I would also add maybe that the pre-step for that is being outside as well,
Yeah,
like I see so many shopping centers being built around cities and inside cities. And I'm always thinking, why don't they build parks or extend forest patches or something? And I think if you have a child, but also ourselves, like I don't have children. And for all the people that don't have children, I mean, we don't need to get children to do it. We can do it ourselves as well. Just go out and, like you say, observe and fall in love with nature. I think it's hard to protect something if you don't understand it or if you don't love it. So just,
definitely. No, I think that's so important. And so many people forget that it is even more exciting to be outside than looking at an
yeah.
iPad 24/7. Like,
Oh, yeah.
you see way more things when you're outside.
Exactly. I love that. Um, and then I have another question, and it's about your thoughts on the relationship between women and nature, like that special relationship between women and nature. And how do you think women can use our power and potential to heal and protect our planet?
I think women are the most, I guess, empowered human beings. And even I say it human beings, but I even refer to females in nature. And I'll say
Yeah.
females because I also refer to those females animals, but
Yeah.
we are the most caring organisms ever. And when I say that, is we, are able to give birth and to take care of our offspring, and we prepare our bodies and ourselves to reproduce, and we achieve that. And so we are great examples of taking care of something and making that little organism be able to grow and be able to, grow well and safely and with the resources it needs. So as an example as simple as that, I think that even though we might not necessarily have kids, but I'm sure we're naturally prepared to take care of something. And when I say that, is I'm sure we're ready to take care of the world and to give that example to other people, that we're capable of, and as women, of take care of mother nature and biodiversity and take care of species and acknowledge how important we are in this role of, being caring and being loving and being protective. And I think our communication skills can go way more and further
Mm.
than within a house. Our sensitivity and our emotional awareness and care, I'm sure it can be communicated worldwide. And we can use that same example the same way as our body and our minds and our hormones prepare to reproduce and take care of our young and our offspring. If that's something that we decide to do, I'm sure we're able to take care of someone else's. And what I mean with that is some other animals, some other plants, some other soil, some other organism or natural resource that we were able to have in our daily lives.
I love that. And I also love that you're highlighting the, obviously, like the biological capabilities, but also what you were saying about our communication skills and the sensitivity that we have and our emotional universe. And I think that's really important as well to remember. And when you were saying before that sometimes they say women are too emotional, I'm so fed up with that because they do. It's always the same. And to be honest, and I've said that before, but the only people in the world who are not emotional are psychopaths. Those
Yeah,
are like, in psychology, someone who's not capable to be emotional, to feel compassion and empathy, those are psychopaths. And we already have enough psychopaths leading countries and companies
I
around the
agree.
world. So we need to lead with more emotions.
Yeah,
to
it's something positive for sure.
Yeah.
I love that completely. I think it's something that I'm proud of. I'm an emotional person, and I'm glad I am, because I'm hopefully someone who is compassionate and who is, empathic and who is loving and caring. Yeah, I love that. I love that you emphasize that.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And also, what you were saying about communication skills, that's also so powerful because we have amazing communication skills. And again, science based. Women use way more words a day than men. And because of also the background that we have when, and it's already in our DNA that women have these capability to communicate in groups, to open up more, uh, leading with emotions and sensitivity as well. And we can just like weave this thing together in terms of messages that we pass on to other generations, but also to our friends, to our communities, and get messages across in a loving and sensitive way that are very important for us and for our planet. Messages of, yeah, how to take care of our planet, how to be aware, how to inform ourselves, and that sort of thing. And I really love it. I think we always talk about, and we always ask this question to all our guests, what's the relationship between women and nature? But nobody brought up communication before. And I'm so glad you did, because it's true. And we should maybe even think about how to exploit it and use it to our advantage more for our purpose to protect the planet. And of course, to all of you who are listening, I also want to be very, very clear on the fact that that doesn't mean that it's our responsibility. Like the
Exactly.
healing of our planet, it's not women's responsibility, it's everyone's responsibility. And we're not saying that. and we're also not saying that, because that's always, a debate from an ecofeminist point of view, if women care for the planet because it's in our biology or because it's a social construct. But whatever it is, it's true that we're always more fine-tuned to really care and be aware of the suffering of our planet. That's why over 57% of executive positions are led by women when it comes to the chief sustainability officer position, in comparison with only 12% of other executive positions around the world. In the corporate world, women are more open to this, more interested, more passionate about that, and that's really a superpower that we have.
Definitely.
And you obviously are an example of that as well. But thank you, because I love that what you were saying. And communication is key as well. We're going to think more about that. um, and then we have another question which has to do with the future, and this one is a hard one, because everyone who works in the environment field, in the conservation field, in the biodiversity, global warming field, are going through right, like there's so much beauty in there, and so much inspiration, and so much ah like wonderful value that's worth fighting for. But at the same time, there are so many challenges, and there are so many blind politicians, and there's corruption, and there's corporate interest, and there's destruction and suffering as well. So sometimes it's hard. You have
Yeah.
like Extinction Rebellion, scientists that are part of that, biologists that are part of that, saying, you guys, the planet is dying, it's burning up, we need to do something yesterday. We cannot, we need to divest from fossil fuels. So there's a lot of there are a lot of emotions going there, and there's a lot of eco anxiety. And yet the people in your field, people like you, are the people I admire the most, because in that context, you still wake up every morning and go to work and give your best to do something for it. So all my respect goes there. But the question is, how do you find hope? How do you find hope for the future? Active hope.
Thank you, Rihanna. That's an amazing question. And just as a side comment, I'm sure that's what you do as well. I'm sure you wake up every day trying to make this amazing project of yours work and encourage and educate people. So thank you for that as well.
Thank you.
Um, I think I find hope by looking at the small actions again. So I often, as I mentioned before, feel very discouraged when I look at the bigger picture, and then I definitely feel overwhelmed by the amount of things we need to work on. But I find hope when I see those small changes and those small actions. And for biodiversity and animals itself, I find hope by staying close to them. So as you said, being outdoors, I often go for walks. I look at the sky to see what birds fly by, and I it's funny, but I spend most of my free time looking at animal videos and nature related videos and trying to picture myself there. And if I'm able, I go and I take a walk, but if not, I try to keep in touch with that biodiversity and those animals. And again, I spend a lot of my time doing observations. And what I mean with that is I acknowledge those roles that um, all species have. So when I do that, I find hope because I remember that I have a role too, and that my role is really supporting those other species roles to be able to be successfully achieved. So I find hope in looking at the local level, by reminding that every single one of my actions has an amazing, small, but amazing impact. And by acknowledging, yeah, that my role is also taking care of others somehow. And that call it animals, that call it people, that call it plants. I have a very important role, and I try to emphasize that as much as I can.
I love that. I love that. And it's about doing what you what you see as, yeah, fulfilling your role, what you have decided that's your role, and doing that. um, I just wanted to say something regarding that as well, because a lot of women sometimes feel that we have, I don't know, somehow it's our responsibility, or that you chose to protect something, and then the accountability for that seems to be all yours. And I remember when I was very, very young, many, many years ago, I decided that I wanted to do something to end poverty in Mexico. And I worked in different initiatives, and then I had a foundation as well. And every year I read the report, the different reports, and poverty was increasing. And I felt it was like a personal failure. Like, oh my God, I'm doing all of this and I'm sacrificing all of that. Like, all my friends were having these super high flying jobs and earning a lot of money, and I was working in the third sector, in the NGO sector, and earning very, very little and sacrificing a lot of things. And I was like, wow, I'm sacrificing so much and I'm working so much and so hard, and I haven't achieved anything, and look, poverty has just increased. I am a failure. And I understood years after that, that first of all, it's not my responsibility, and secondly, I was I was probably dealing with a lot of ego, because I thought I was able to solve that, which is crazy. I cannot solve world poverty, let alone, I mean, not poverty in Mexico, not poverty in Mexico City or in one neighborhood. I cannot. I am not Wonder Woman. Nobody is. But we can be part of efforts and of groups and communities of people that collectively can make that happen.
Yeah.
And I love hearing you say that and being so young and so aware of that, because I think that's good also for women to start seeing that we can all add, but it's not our sole responsibility.
Exactly. And I will just reframe um, what you said in the sense that you can. You said I can't, solve poverty at a local level or within a community, but like you can. And I feel like it's important to reframe that by understanding that being able to do something doesn't mean that you need to do it
Yes.
alone, right? So you
Yeah.
can do it with a group, and I know you say you can do it with a group of people, but it's important to just remind yourself you can. But
Yeah.
there's no one that said that for you to be able to do that you need to do it by yourself. So I think it's just we need to remember we can do a lot of
Yes.
things, but it's I haven't done a lot of things in my life by myself. Like, the place where I live, I might be able to wake up every day, but if it wasn't by that construction workers who built my house and who made my bed, I wouldn't be able to wake up from my bed and, walk to my apartment every single day. Like, I think
Yeah.
all of that somehow or indirectly was done by someone else's action. And something that you mentioned that I also want to put emphasis on is that you often felt discouraged. And there is something that I always want to make everyone aware of and put a lot of attention to. Mental health is super important. And I want to acknowledge that mental health, again, oftentimes being able to be mentally healthy, it's a privilege. And I
Yes.
think and I take responsibility as an individual to highlight that, mental health needs to be a priority everywhere so you can deal with challenges such as conservation, and to be able to feel encouraged to keep on working in these actions to make that happen. And just as a personal background story, of course, I struggled throughout a couple of my experiences of mental health, because obviously I felt, you know, very disappointed, and I was very nervous that I wasn't able to achieve what I was trying to achieve. And there's actually a very interesting concept that is called compassion fatigue, and it is
Mm. Yes.
uh yeah, stage at which you feel literally the suffering of others, and somehow you buffer that yourself, and that causes a lot of different symptoms such as lack of sleep, increased reactivity, anxiety, then a lot of people struggle with it. So I think it is important to have a very important awareness of your mental well-being. And if you feel sad over many, months because you're not being able to achieve that conservation action or achieve what you're looking for, talk to someone, raise awareness and explain what you're feeling. And it's not normal to, feel sad, but like all the time, right? But you can feel sad a day and that will be okay, and be
Yes.
compassionate with yourself. But I think it is very important to acknowledge that there is a lot of things that you can potentially be exposed to when working in this very stressful environments. Conservation, for sure, it is a very stressful environment, but I think it is important to speak about mental health, speak about the importance of talking to others, being compassionate with yourself. And if you're sad and feel discouraged, it's okay. You'll feel better. And yeah, we can make a very positive impact when you're very conscious and aware of your emotions.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. That I think that's a beautiful phrase to close this, because it's true. And it's like you need to be well yourself first if you're going to be able to give the best as well, right? It sounds
Definitely.
like a cliche, like your cup needs to be full, but it's true. It's true, especially in this field.
Yes,
Wow.
exactly.
Dileri, it has been such an honor and such a pleasure, and it's been really a delicious conversation. I love talking with you and listening to the work that you're doing. How can we help? How can we support your work and your initiatives as well?
Thank you so much, Ariana. For me, it was also an amazing pleasure to meet you and to be able to see that person behind all of this amazing project, and the work you've done, and the
Thank you.
raising awareness and increasing communication and supporting education. Like, that is absolutely amazing. And I think the best way to support is continuing this communication, and continuing by, talking to those people that not necessarily may have access to the same information as we have.
Mhm.
Because as I mentioned in the beginning of this conversation, kind of closing up that idea, um, access to information is already a privilege. So being able to, talk
Yes.
to people that might not be under the same opportunities as we have, it's so important. So sharing knowledge with people, creating education campaigns, being able to highlight biodiversity by giving even the opportunity for people to see what biodiversity in the other side of the world might look like. What are their roles? Like, what are the
Yes.
things that, a lot of people don't have access to, this very simple things. And then the other part, I think something that we can do to help is environmental justice. And what does that mean? Is the equal and just, opportunity to resources and natural resources specifically. So what I mean with that is be aware of, your use of the natural resources, and
Yes.
don't be unfair. Like, we might have, more economic capabilities to make an action, but is it fair? Is it fair to use more water than the one we need just because we're able to pay for it? Is it fair to use more electricity than other people that might not be able to pay for it but might also need it? So I think there's a lot of actions that we need to support environmental justice. Like, it's not fair to pollute an area that you don't live in, because people might be exposed to pollution, and there's a great risk to health through
Yes.
pollution. So is it right to throw our trash in someone else's land, just because we don't live there? We
Yeah.
might be exposing someone else to pollution. And so I think we need to pursue environmental justice, and we need to pursue, that our daily decision making is really able to support the right and fair and equal distribution of resources and treatment of biodiversity.
Great. So there you go. We already know what we can start doing. And I also thank you for what you were saying about the work that I'm doing. But to be honest, I'm not doing that on my own. I am part of an amazing team of amazing women who make this possible. And Ana Pau, Francis, Lucero, Sadia. we are really, I am really fortunate to be able to be part of such a team, and they're really the magic behind all of this. So
I
thank
agree.
you. I will let them know as well, because it's always nice for them also to know that that work is appreciated. And Dileri, again, thank you, and thank you for inspiring us as well to believing in ourselves, in our power to do things, to impact our world, and to protect our animals as well. We're going to share this episode together with a lot of links and some of the things that you were mentioning. Maybe we'll add some link on compassion fatigue as well for those who
Yes,
are
that would
interested
be
when you mentioned that. Yes,
incredible.
great.
And I am more than happy to also send a couple of links over there
Yes,
about books that help to deal with some of these challenges. And thank you, Ariana. It was amazing,
thank you.
and your team is amazing. And I might not have the pleasure to know all of them, but Ana Pao, I know
Yes,
that's a very special soul over there trying to pursue
she
as
is.
well the better of the world. So gracias. Thank you so, so, so much.
Gracias, Dileri. Thank you so much. And this is your house. I'm sure we're going to have more conversations in the future as
I'm sure
well.
I would love that. Thank you
Thank
so much.
you. Take care.
Have a nice day.
You
Bye.
too. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for our next episode. In the meantime, don't forget to stay inspired and share with us your ideas about why we will make it.